So this video is an introduction to logic and arguments, which are a very important part of philosophy. Okay, so let's start with the question, what is an argument? Well, an argument is a set of statements, including at least one premise and at least one conclusion. And the premise or premises support the conclusion. The conclusion is the statement that's being argued for. Both premises and conclusions are statements. Here's an example. If you are in Toronto, then you are in Ontario. You're in Toronto, therefore you are in Ontario. So premises 1 and 2 support the conclusion 3. Well, how do we evaluate premises and conclusions? Well, premises and conclusions, remember, they're statements. So they're either true or false. True statements correspond to the world. False statements do not correspond to the world. And sometimes we don't know whether a statement is true or false. So snow is white, that's a statement that corresponds to the world. So it's true. The earth is flat is a false statement that doesn't correspond to the world, so it's false. And Biden will win the 2020 US presidential election. That's either true or false, but we don't know whether it's true or false, right? So we evaluate premises and conclusions as either true or false. Arguments are different. So remember, an argument is all the premises and conclusions together, or conclusion together. So we evaluate arguments in 2 ways. The first is validity. So a valid argument is an argument in which the conclusion follows from the premises. So in other words, it's impossible for the premises to be true and the conclusion false. Here's some examples. All people are mortal. Kanye West is a person, so Kanye West is mortal. So the conclusion that Kanye West is mortal follows from the premises that all people are mortal and Kanye West is a person. Here's another example. If you complete all the assignments on time, you will get an A in this class. You completed all the assignments on time, so you will get an A in this class. In this case, the conclusion 3 is supported by 1 and 2, so it's a valid argument. But notice you could have a valid argument that has a false premise, right? It might be true that if you complete the assignments on time, you don't get an A in this class because you don't need to just complete them, but you need to do them well. And if you don't do them well, maybe you would get a B or a C, right? So the second argument can be valid because all it means is if the premises are true, then the conclusion is true. But that doesn't mean that the premises aren't true. So you could almost like pretend the premises are true and then think about if those are true, is the conclusion true? That'll tell you if it's valid. But the question of whether the premises themselves are true, that's not what validity is about. There's also invalid arguments. These are arguments in which the conclusion doesn't follow from the premises. So here's some examples. If you watch this video closely, then you will learn about arguments. You watched this video closely. Therefore, God does not exist. Okay, this is very obviously an invalid argument because the conclusion just comes out of nowhere. It has nothing to do with the premises, right? So here's a little more subtly invalid argument. If you stole my cell phone, then you're a thief. You are a thief, therefore you stole my cell phone. And in this case, the conclusion is related to the premises, but it actually doesn't follow from them. And that's because it could be true that if you steal my cell phone, you're a thief, and you're a thief, but it's that you stole my car, right? So you're a thief because you stole my car. It would still be true that if you stole my cell phone, you would be a thief too, but just because you're a thief doesn't automatically mean you stole my cell phone. So sometimes it's really obvious that an argument's invalid, and sometimes it's a little more subtle, and we kind of have to think, well, let's really think about what if these premises are true? Is the conclusion going to be true? And yeah, in some cases, it seems like the conclusion might be true, but we really have to think about whether the conclusion follows. Okay, this is the last concept we're going to talk about, and that's soundness. So remember, we said we could have a valid argument that has false premises. Validity is just about the relationship between the premises and the conclusion. A sound argument is one that's valid and has true premises. So here's some examples of sound arguments. There are purple flowers, therefore there are flowers. So this argument's valid because the premise supports the conclusion. If the premise is true, then the conclusion is true. But it also has true premises because there are purple flowers and there are flowers. So sound arguments always have true conclusions. Here's another example. All people are mortal. Kanye West is a person, therefore Kanye West is mortal. So we actually use the same example when we were talking about valid arguments. So this argument is both valid and sound. The premises support the conclusion and the premises are true. So all sound arguments must be valid, but it's not true that all valid arguments must be sound. And then finally, there's unsound arguments. And an unsound argument either isn't valid or has at least one false premise. So all of the invalid arguments we talked about, if you watch this video, you'll learn about logic. You watch this video, but therefore God doesn't exist. That would be unsound, right? But here's some other examples. If the moon is yellow, then the moon is made of cheese. The moon is yellow, therefore the moon is made of cheese. And notice that in this argument, the premises do support the conclusion. If the premises are true, the conclusion is true. But the premises are false. So this is an unsound argument, not because it's not valid, but because it has false premises. So there's basically two ways an argument could be unsound. All right, so here's just a summary of the terms we've learned today: argument, premise, conclusion, valid, sound, true, false. And hopefully this can aid us in doing philosophy better and identifying both what makes statements good and bad and what makes arguments good and bad.